myself. I'm Kevin Armstrong, facilitator for the evening, and my co-facilitator, Auren Ruvinsky. And we're representing the Speak Out group. Now, if you don't know what the Speak Out group is, we've been around for about 8 months, and what we do is that we have support communication between all shareholder groups. And what we do is that we hold forums such as this, and we don't have, as a group, any beliefs one side or the other. We're completely neutral as a group. Quit makeup on your faces. Thank you. And we just try to establish communication, try to solve problems that affect young people. So tonight we're going to be speaking about the referendum. So I'd just like to hand the mic over to Auren right now, and he'll talk a bit about it.
He introduced himself. I'm Auren. Naomi, you're going to stand up. This is the third member of our group at the moment. We came from the Tri-City Health Promotion Project. I might just mention that. As Kevin mentioned, we're talking about the referendum tonight, and I think we're just going to start with an informal poll on how you would vote if you are going to vote at the moment. So maybe we can just get a show of hands. Yes. Start with yes. We got no one undecided. Yes? Everybody votes. No? And undecided? Okay, at this point I guess we just open up the floor to penalty.
This isn't really a question, but rather a statement. I would vote no if I could vote, but the fact remains that because I'm 17, I don't have a say in what happens to this country, and I'm extremely upset about this. So, does anyone have anything to say about why this law is in place, or what we can do to change it?
I don't have any idea why the law is in place, and it is changing. This is a federal law. Eventually, as you probably know, the law was changed hurriedly from 19 to 18 because we felt that younger people should be able to vote. And I don't know how 18 gets set or how 17 was set. But as for whether or not you have a say, one of the things I thought was neat about Auren talking about doing this when he called me up was that I think you have more of a say in this issue than usual because everybody has more of a say. Like there's lots of adults who are not going to vote but who are saying a great deal because oral communication and talking to the TV serves to put forward your point of view. And this forum, I mean, the amazing thing about this referendum to me has been that the high schools I have gone to in the Custody, Denver, Nelson, have been way more receptive to the discussion and fervently involved in the discussion than most of the grown-ups I've talked to.
You may have an enormous amount of influence on those people that do, because there are a lot of undecideds. And if you use your knowledge of the issues to influence other people, I think that's the positive thing that can come out of this. That's what I would recommend.
The favor right now is definitely in the no. And I would just like to ask anyone who is feeling that they want to vote no, why? Can I ask if anyone who's voting yes would like to say why? Well, okay.
Well, one of the reasons, I'm undecided, actually. I'm not undecided right now, but one of the reasons
that I would need to know is, I'm from Quebec originally, although I've been in Nelson 12 years. I grew up as an Anglophone, French father, English mother, in Quebec, very typical match where I came from, up in the rural area. And I had, as a Quebecois, even though I was an Anglophone, had no, I grew up in a rural area, 80% town, 80% French, 20% English, and I had many English friends, many French friends, and I had felt the warmth, the depth, the power of both those cultures, particularly the French culture. And the thing I have a hard time with, though, is, I guess, one of the issues that Pierre Trudeau speaks about, which is the leaning on the distinct society clause, making a special concessions for Quebecers. That, don't get me wrong, I think that we need to address that issue. I believe that a lot of the Quebec language rights and cultural rights have been entrenched provincially for them. But that's one reason why I don't know, is making that distinction. Coming out west, even before that was a big issue, I found a lot of animosity from the west, looking back to the east. I found that, and there's a lot of misunderstanding and misconceptions between Westerners and Easterners, particularly Westerners and Quebecers. And I'm not sure if this is a way to solve it. I think that may make things worse.
I do have to agree that generally what constitutions try to do is bring equality to all people. And yet what this constitutional referendum seems to do is give special privileges to others. Who here agrees with that? Would you like to make any comments on that? Yeah, so how are you going to vote?
I'm voting yes.
Do you know why?
Because we need a change, and I think if we vote no, we're going to be back to the drawing table.
Anyone else? Okay.
I agree, that's a whole other issue,
Did you say yes because are you voting yes? Is that what you said? Yeah, that's the other issue that I deal with is, here we've got 2 years plus of consultation with people all across the country. I mean, it's amazing. I don't know of any other societies or governments that have gone to the length that this government has gone to get feedback from people. And I think that's great. And then we've got all the premiers of all these provinces to make some kind of agreement. It's not, there's so many things in there that are starred, if you've read that document that aren't quite finalized yet. It's a framework, it's a skeleton, and sure it's shaky, but they've made an agreement of some sort. And they've tried to meet the needs of a lot of self-interest groups, or small interest groups, or minority groups, whatever. My fear is that as our country grows, as immigration becomes an increasing demand on our country, which it should, we need to get ready for that. This little spaceship is getting smaller, and we have a lot, and we're going to have to, the demand is going to be put on us to share those resources and space more. We're going to become increasingly multicultural, and there are going to be, increasing demands on minorities. From minorities, I should say. And as time goes on, it's easy to say 5 years from now we can do this again, but I'm telling you, if you thought it was hard now, and my fear is it's going to be much harder 5 years from now.
Especially after the free trade has gone through. We're supposed to be getting all these great things, and I don't feel it's that great of a deal. And now they're saying, well, yes, vote yes, we're going to have a great meal. And do I trust them now? Will we be getting a great deal? I feel like I've got a package in front of me, and I don't know what's in it. I listen to CBC, and I read as much as I can, and I still don't know what's in it. A lot of people don't. I feel like, am I going to buy something that I don't know what's in it? I'd rather just pass on it until I get on the balance.
I think you're speaking for a lot of people. I agree. You have to make a decision on faith. You're right. If you're going to vote yes, absolutely. Because it's neat. I don't know if you've ever hung out with any young people from places like Czechoslovakia, Poland, Romania, Yugoslavia, South America, places where there's a lot of political action happening, where people are face to face every day with political decisions. Uncles and aunts get put in jail, the government's changing and stuff. Those people are politically aware. The nice thing about this whole thing, whether it's yes or no, to me, is a lot of people are going to become much more politically aware of what's happening in this country. That's good. So I'm going to do it. I love that understanding.
Now, whether we vote yes and put it through and then have it again in another 5 years when the white people are unhappy, or whether we have it not go through, have it totally redrawn to try and appease some people, obviously it'll end up alienating someone else. And I think that probably we haven't been given enough time to really think about this. We've been given 2 months from the time it was drawn up, signed, and agreed upon till we have to vote on it.
And I think too, a lot of people are voting yes, not because they know what's in the package, because the big hype of if they don't vote yes, the country's going to fall apart, and also affect myself. I was talking to my sister on the phone, and she lives in Montreal, and she says, well, I hope you're going to vote yes. I said, why? Well, so we won't separate, because I don't want to. I think a lot of people have that in their heads, that yes means, not to separate.
That is a big issue. Does voting no mean that Quebec will not separate, or will separate? So I'm sure that if the referendum doesn't go through, they'll find another solution. I mean, voting yes certainly isn't going to solve any problems. It's only going to create new ones, I think.
That's what I don't like about this Constitution. It seems to me that it's more or less designed to separate Canada into different bits. You got 3 distinct Canadas, plus you got all sorts of groups that otherwise would be happy getting along with each other, suddenly hate each other, or at least not hate each other, but having like incredibly differing opinions on something that's just, it looks fairly simple to read, but there's so many shoulds and maybes inside of this Constitution. It's almost like it's kind of a silly fight. They can change it any way they want in the next 5 years. And that's what I think is scary about it.
That's a very good point. I'd just like to ask, how many people here feel that they're being pressured into voting yes? Although that may not seem like that much, it is actually quite a significant number. I don't feel that anyone should be pressured into voting yes or no.
Well, I think at the beginning that was the government's time to pressure everybody. Now they're realizing it's not working. And now they're saying, oh, well, the country's really not going to fall apart.
Another thing is this Constitution really going to keep Quebec in Canada? Obviously the Québécois are not happy being in Canada. They want their distinct society status. They want to be separated even if they stay within the country.
Well, 20% of Quebecers are separatists. And even though we vote yes, who says you're not going to still push to separate? They're still going to push to separate. You might have a little, but they're still going to become out.
Yeah, I don't know. I'm the one that doesn't think that no necessarily means that it's going to encourage somehow separation.
No.
Anyway, I don't believe that the majority of Quebecers want to separate. I think that Barassa is playing a very dangerous game. He's wanting to, it's all votes. He wants to make everyone happy. So he's playing hardball with the Fed so that he can get what he wants for Quebec. But at the same time, he wants to appease English Canada into the backfire on him. I think he's making more of an issue than it really is.
Right now I'd like to ask our yes representative here, what is it about this constitutional referendum that is good?
When I look at this agreement, I try to look at it as a Canadian rather than from the point of view of a vested interest as a British Columbian or any other group in society that I might represent. And what I like about this agreement is its spirit of compromise. It's a classic Canadian document in spirit of compromise which tries to accommodate all of the diverse interests that we have in this country. And I suppose a measure of the fact that we've succeeded here is that nobody likes it. And that's usually the sign of a good deal. If you talk about it in terms, labor relations terms, right? Everybody has had to give up something in this traditional Canadian compromise in order to reach this agreement. It will always be that way. If we wait, as some people are suggesting, we will only get more diverse and more separate in our ways, and it will be even more difficult to pull the country together in the future. So what I like in general terms, I can answer in specific terms if we get into detail later, but what I like in general terms is this spirit of compromise. This summer, my wife and I traveled across the country. We spent 4 months promoting Canadian unity across the country. And so when we came back and faced this decision about how we would vote on this agreement, we were looking at it from what I would call a pan-Canadian point of view, rather than just from our little corner of the universe here in the West Coast. And so what we're being asked to do now is to vote in principle on a set of ideas about how to operate the country on into the 21st century. And if we don't get it together now, the 21st century will come and go, and we won't be ready for it. So this is a blueprint for us that we have to pick up and run with now. It's our last chance. And that's not, I don't mean that as a threat. I mean that as in terms of looking around us, in terms of the globalization that's occurring in the world. We have to be ready for that. And this is one step towards that.
Well, why can't we do this 5 years from now or 10 years from now? Maybe we'll know better.
Right? It's possible that we could do it 5 or 10 years from now. But if you look at this incredible juxtaposition of events that has occurred here in the early 90s, where we have a diversity of different political parties represented in power in the various provinces, 3 NDP governments, 4 Liberal governments, 3 Conservative governments, or vice versa, and a federalist government in Quebec, plus a responsive and well-organized Aboriginal group. The time is right to do it now. We may never have those events occur again in the future. We can't count on that. And I'm not saying that to scare you in any way, because I'm fully in favor of the agreement. I like the agreement. I like particularly specific parts of it. The Senate, for example, which gives what I think are hidden benefits to Western Canada that really haven't been discussed or talked about. So I think the time is now. We can't keep spinning our wheels. And if I could just say one more thing, addressing this question of all of this information about the referendum, about the changes in the Constitution having to be assimilated and absorbed in this 2-month period. Remember now, as someone else said, there was a 2-year lead up to this, where the whole country talked about it through the Spicer Commission, through Baudouin-Dobie, and all of these other things that we asked for when we rejected each lake.
Maybe we should talk about what's actually in the Constitution. What about the Aboriginal rights? What are they getting out of it? I heard something about a certain level of government.
Yeah.
They would maybe be able to propose a fair tax on us. Maybe I can explain a little bit.
Would it be better if we had a more definite or definitive? The Constitution is very confusing. Would it be better if they drafted up one that was more definitive, more to the point, instead of making Canadians
And
confused?
then we understand.
That's the point.
No.
I've got a point.
That's the point.
I've got a very strong statement. I think people should think about all of the principles of this document are fluid. The definitions of rights are very fluid and very changeable. The principles of the document are fluid. The methods by which those very loose principles are going to be applied are fixed. The number of MPs, the control of MPs, the control of the judicial, those things are fixed forever in this Constitution. But the principles by which they're being fixed are extremely fluid. And I think that's backward. I think if you believe in your principles, if you have strong morals, a strong set of rights and wrongs, you need to set your principles very, very firmly. You need to fix, this is what I believe in. And then the method by which you accomplish that can be fluid to meet the needs of the people as they change. around the basic human rights.
Do you think by voting yes that this will be really beneficial for the Aboriginal people? I mean, it says here that, I mean, they do gain something out of it, but I mean, there's, right in there it says there's nothing for new land claims and stuff. No, I mean, it has no benefit from that in that area. I mean, what is the benefit of this for the Aboriginal people?
Yeah, just to address your concern about land claims, that was agreed to by the Aboriginal people to, in fact, allay the concerns of British Columbians, particularly that the inherent right to self-government wouldn't imply any further land claims beyond what they have now. So that was agreed to. Remember, what we have in the agreement is something that was agreed to by the Aboriginal leadership and all of the government representatives, federal and provincial. And what it does for both the Aboriginals and more so for Canada as a whole is it lifts us out of this embarrassing situation, embarrassing on a world scale that we have had for so many years, where our Aboriginals have been at the very bottom of our socioeconomic scale and in desperate straits and in a sense kind of captives to the Indian Affairs Department in Ottawa. And we have to do something about that as Canadians. Whether it's inside or outside the Constitution, you'll have to do it anyway. And so it seems to me that doing it within the Constitution is a way for Canada to say, we need to make this right, and we want it right within our main document that governs the country.
Kind of sticking to the land claims here, because I was going to ask, have you visited many Aboriginal communities?
A few.
I spent some time in some this summer, and I found that talking to the Aboriginal people themselves, land claims is a big issue. And I mean, I don't know who said no. I mean, obviously there were Aboriginal people, but who really? I mean, land claims is an extremely big issue when you go into the community and talk one-on-one with the Aboriginal people.
But this doesn't mean this doesn't affect land claims one way or the other. It was only you referenced the land claims in the sense that it was in the Constitution. It was only to spell out that an inherent self-government couldn't be used as an argument in court to further land claims. That doesn't in any way displace all of the land claims, court cases that are going on in the country and will go on, and settlements that will go on. In fact, in BC, you know, there have never been any treaties, as most of you probably know. And so we have all of that to settle, but it won't be done within a constitutional context.
I find something very disturbing here by saying that the Aboriginal leaders decided on this. It's like saying the NDP government represents me. They do not. I'm sure there are Aboriginal people who are not at all pleased with their leaders. So I don't think that in the ways that these decisions were made, I don't think they were done properly.
Yeah.
And I think that in order to write a constitution, the government shouldn't write it and have us decide upon whether we want it or not. That the people should totally write it. Like, not the other way around.
I feel that was an excellent point brought up, is that should the government be deciding for us and having us vote on it, or should we be deciding for ourselves what should be in a constitution? Who here would agree with that? Who here would disagree with that?
We are deciding that, Kevin. That's what a referendum is.
Yes, I know, but should we sit back and let the government write it, or should we write it ourselves?
Well, you know, 20 million is too many to sit down together.
And we elected the government for a reason.
Well, voices.
He's upset.
I feel like we're talking as if we're dealing with an abstract here. Firstly, the document is over there, and we could, for those folks who feel that they don't understand it, go through it clause by clause, and I'd love to. And I don't have any time limit. I'm getting docked $100 today, and people are grumpy because I'm not in the legislature. I'm here to be with you. We're using the word politician like people a long time ago used to use racial epithets against black people and Jewish people. And I feel that. 1 year ago, I passed amongst you as an equal, and now I'm some kind of scum. I would love to be with you this evening for as long as it takes to go through it page by page, and that's what I thought I was going to do. The other thing I want to say strongly, is that we live in an apartheid system, essentially. We are not busted for it internationally because we call it the Indian Act, but it has been ever thus. If you live in Cranbrook on the St. Mary's Reserve and you are dying, you have to ask permission of a white bureaucrat in Indian Affairs to write a will to give your belongings to your child, and after you're dead, your child has to get that same person's permission to bury you. Because we have never in 125 years managed to get out from under the Indian Act, and it is because governments don't do things to be nice. They do things to respond to many pressures, some of them wonderful, some of them horrible, some of them democratic, some of them monetary. But we haven't managed with some wonderful governments and horrible governments to get out from under the Indian Act, because the wealth that we have in this room and I'm wearing on my body and you folks have in your house and your car, we took, and we're real afraid to change the rules. So for 125 years through good governments and bad, we haven't managed. Now we have a moment in time where it is true the Quebecois, the separatists, the 20% have threatened some of the governments, and the right wing got real unhappy when Elijah Harper refused to pass Meech Lake. We had the accident of Meech Lake, and a whole country, 20 million people, see a native person say no 3 times in a row on 3 different days, and the country kind of got shocked. And then the following summer they saw Oka. And then they had an October deadline to deal with the Constitution for Quebec, and we brought together a moment when we had a premier from the Yukon who had settled the land claim issue over the last 5 years. The first time there was a Caucasian politician could walk in a room and say to his other uptight brothers, hey, you guys, it's not that bad. We can do this thing. And because of the pressures that came to bear from all sides, they made this accord, which I think, as a person who has lived in racist societies all my life and now represents one, is a miracle. I heard people say there's nobody who wants this thing. I want this thing. I think this is a miracle of our experience. It is flawed, but the idea that without guns, a dominant culture decided to knock the props out underneath their racist legislation is unique. Czechoslovakia is coming up, our Yugoslavia is coming up, our South Africa, Romania, all of the societies where cultures couldn't figure out how to live together. This is a flawed document, but it is not, as you said, a way to make unequal people. That's a position, you can say that from a place of power, because we are masculine Caucasians, you and I. We are the most powerful people on the planet. We are now trying to say we're going to come up with some kind of system so you and I can't run it all. I think that's incredible. It is flawed, but I think it's a miracle, so I defend it.
Well, first of all, I have to apologize if there have been any kind of misunderstandings or any offenses taken. You know, I'm sure none of that was ever meant or anything.
It's okay, I'm just tired. And I take offense at nothing. It's okay. I think this is wonderful. I just feel strong sometimes.
Okay, so definitely one of the big parts of this Constitution is the word compromise. But you also have to ask, how much are we compromising? Are we compromising too much? Are we compromising not enough? Or are we doing it just right?
It may look like we're trying to make a compromise for the native people of this country, but I feel that we're not looking at their issues in a whole. I'm not happy with this document, and I feel that we're not making enough compromise for the native people or for women. Or I haven't read the entire document, but I don't see anything in there about any kind of ecological things, because this is a constitution for a country, and in days of environmental crisis, we have to look at that as part of our government, and I didn't see anything like that, so we're not making enough compromise.
I could just make a couple comments about your observations earlier and your concerns about that perhaps there wasn't enough consultation with the Aboriginals and between their leaders and the people themselves. it was my impression, and I followed the whole process very carefully. In fact, as my wife and I were touring the country, we were meeting with the premiers of each province as we moved across. We were talking to them about the Constitution. And my impression was that the consultation process among the Aboriginals was much more sophisticated and much more thorough than it was among the non-Aboriginals. And so I feel comfortable about that consultation process, even though, as you point out rightly, there are some Aboriginals who are not satisfied. Again, I think that's a measure of a good agreement in the sense that if they were all satisfied, we might be a little suspicious that the pendulum had swung too much one way or the other. Although I would suspect, I would agree with you that it probably couldn't in the case of the Aboriginals. But there has to be a fine balance here among all interests. And as far as the question of introducing the subject of the environment into the Constitution, I think it's a legitimate concern. And the only observation I would make is that very, very few countries have this kind of provision in their Constitution. The proposed amendments to the Constitution, including the social and economic union sections of the proposed amendments, go well beyond what most countries have in their Constitution. And many constitutional experts argued that we shouldn't have even gone that far, that things like the environment and so on, to use a word that was introduced earlier, are too fluid to be fixed into a Constitution. And therefore, in some respects, it might put the whole environmental concern into a kind of straitjacket that we didn't want it in, if we put it in the Constitution.
But do you agree that there are some basic rights, environmental rights, clean water, clean air, that everyone should have, and these should be written down, and the government shouldn't have to? They don't.
And of course, we may come to that in another phase in the constitutional making. After all, this is an evolving document. But there's no argument for it. There's no argument that you can make an excellent case that it should be there. You could also make an excellent case that a lot of other things should be there. But if you look to this agreement to satisfy every concern in society, it's true. But it simply cannot do that. The Constitution cannot be all things to all people. It simply can't be. But I admit that it's a major oversight. Go ahead.
This is, what I'm talking about is life itself. The right to be able to breathe without dying. Like the right to not live near nuclear toxic waste dumps. Like this is not, maybe salaries should be, lowered. This is life. If one thing should be in the Constitution, it's this.
Should actually be in the Charter of Rights, which of course is not part of these amendments, but came in 82, and maybe that's when we should have had this discussion in 82.
And I have a question for Corky, that maybe you can clear up something for me. I'm having a hard time understanding. One of the things that that I get concerned about is the decrease in federal power. That the provinces will get increased power, and that the fear is that in so doing, Aboriginal peoples from those provinces or other folks will be can they be cultural issues, language rights, that kind of stuff. There'll be the watered down also, that with a reduced federalism, that Canada will be more susceptible to being Americanized, the people who are against it, which I agree with myself, and are fearful of a reduced federalism that happen. Now, when I look through this document, I have a hard time figuring out where are the parts of this where the feds have given up powers.
Sorry, fine. Firstly, about the earlier question about the environment, I think everybody would concede that it does not guarantee life. But there are levels of government, and a constitution is about how we make decisions. The guarantees that you ask for clean water, clean air, and the like, those are decisions. Those are decisions that we all must make. And decisions are laws. This is not a law. This is a guide to how decisions will be made. That's the difference in all countries of the world between a constitution, which says how we'll make decisions, and laws, which says what the decisions are. It's also not a chalice or an altar. We didn't write up there everything that was important to us. We talked about how we would make decisions. And it is one of the few, the Canada Clause in the beginning, which moved the Green Party of Canada to support the Accord, is one of the few constitutions in the world now which mentions the environment. And surely you could read that in the Canada Clause. It's right there in the beginning of the document. The Green Party of British Columbia has objected to it. So the Green Party is split federally and provincially, as are many women's issues, Aboriginal organizations, the like. Many political parties, the Liberals, some Conservatives, I think, probably and some New Democrats. But it is there, and it is unique and leading the world. It's not law because it's not a package of laws. The laws are like who gets the vote and whether or not there's clean water and those things that we need to work on. In answer to your question about you see, here's the argument. I'm going to make the argument for the people that are against it. We have a free trade agreement, which means the country to the south already has too much power in our country. So people are concerned that if the federal government becomes weakened and the provinces become strengthened, then the poorest provinces like Newfoundland, I was just there, the ore is about gone, the trees are about gone, and the cod is all gone. So Canadian fishermen have all been brought to court. There's 125 foreign fishermen catching the remainder of the cod. So the Newfoundlanders are broke and unhappy. And the people of New York are trying to cut a deal with Newfoundland to dump their garbage in Newfoundland because it's weakened. And the question is, will we create 10 weakened organizations which can be picked off by the nation from the south? It is my impression, and that's, I think that's the opinion of fine people, the anti-free trade movement, and it's true of people like Pierre Trudeau, too, who are internationally leaders in the business world. It's my feeling that ignores history. Canada's constitution predates the World War II. It predates modern society. It predates the Depression. We didn't write down what is provincial power and what is federal power. We said the following will be provincial power and everything else, even if it's not written down, will be federal. And since that time, our society and people in this room have come to demand post-secondary education. It was not a demand of the working class. When they put this country together, it wasn't our right. Healthcare, it wasn't our right. Pensions, it wasn't there. UIC, social assistance, workers' comp, lots of stuff, eh? Multiculturalism. These weren't thought of when the BNA Act and the Constitution began to evolve. So we don't know what's provincial and what's federal. The document in your hand says that certain things will now become provincial, and that scares some people. What we have right now is those things being managed by two levels of government. I've heard the word bureaucrat used 3 times here, once by myself tonight. We have twice as many civil servants between us and our lawmakers as necessary, because we've got federal and provincial ministries of forestry, for example, ministries of mines, for example, ministries of tourism, advanced education, telecommunications, transportation. What the document says is, okay, now we're going to write down what becomes provincial. I was terrified in the middle of the summer when they were talking that Canada Council would be eliminated, culture would come to the provinces. Artists all over Canada fought that to say we want Canada Council to remain federal and CBC. And so it went through every sector. I am thrilled that the federal government gets out of the forestry business, because the federal government in forestry and the mining business is on the side of multinational capital and it's in the way. I'm not going to try and explain it to you, but they are not part of the problem, part of the solution, let me tell you. They are part of those people that makes it easier to come here with your money from New Zealand and buy chunks of Canada. So now you're going to say that forestry, for example, will be provincial. I don't think it's a threat. When we build our highways and power lines and logging companies on native land, we deserve to be taxed. And this is going to give them the right, and the right to impose environmental restrictions upon our actions. And you're darn right they have that right. And it says in there, in the United States, there are reserves of broken and poverty-stricken people, and there are such reserves in Canada too. That's what our culture has done. people. And in the United States, the corporations are using those reserves as nations, and they are saying we will dump our pollutants on Indian land because we can pay them to take them. We made a lot of Aboriginal people angry in the negotiations because there's a clause in the document. I really want you to read it. I really want you to take them home and read them, please. There's a clause in the document that says Native self-government will be within the terms of peace, order, and good government in Canada. And Moses Hoda says what that means is you can't build a pulp mill on Indian land after this thing passes, should it, and operate on different rules than you can on anywhere else within the government, because the rules of Aboriginal administration will have to fit within peace, order, and good government, which means the rules of provincial law and federal law. I find that to be a protection in terms of the environment. There is Aboriginal leadership, such as the Mohawks in Quebec and Selkirk in British Columbia, who find that to be an impediment. They believe that they have nations and that they ought to be able to operate at the United Nations and make whatever deal they want. That means, for example, the Americanization of Ganasawagi in terms of gambling and machine guns. You know that there is peace, order, and good government that we wish to impose, which is reasonable. And it means the New Mexico solution, where poverty-stricken Aboriginal nations can be the dumping ground, like northern Mexico, of the pollutants of corporate America. We don't want that.
There will be a 5-year period during which self-government rights will not be enforceable in the courts. So I mean, why not wait 5 years for the Aboriginal people? Why is that not enough?
Because have you ever negotiated, like in your class or in your family or something like that? The 5-year period is intended to allow Native people to come to cohesive positions, and we already have one you may not know, we already have negotiated one self-government arrangement in Seychelles. That's an example. Other Aboriginal people are looking towards other examples. What we're trying to do is get 20 or 25 self-governments negotiated over that 5-year period to see what they look like. And we've said white people's courts can't impose a settlement for 5 years. That's a protection on Aboriginal people. It means if you don't like the first deal that gets cut, you can't go to the Supreme Court and try to knock it down for a 5-year period. And then after 5 years, it's only justiciable if the Supreme Court finds that Native people and the Caucasian governments bargained in good faith. If either people, including our own government, didn't bargain in good faith, the judge orders them to go back. I think that clause, far from being a loophole, is a stroke of genius, because it recognizes the way people think. We don't walk into a room and know what we're doing the moment we get there. It is also bringing out some horrible truths about our country. There's anti-Jew and anti-black people literature being thrown on lawns in Nelson. There's crosses being burnt in the next valley over. There is, I walked out of a restaurant tonight where there was 6 men in front of me, Caucasian males my age that I know, shouting at me about people in Quebec. I think right now we are engaging in the dialogue we should have had a long time ago, and this is the beginning of the struggle to resolve the problems. I expect the Constitution will be voted down, but the struggle has begun, and this is now, and it will carry on. I just want us to focus on where it is we have to go out of this. We have to figure out that either we figure out how to accommodate one another, or we're going to go the way of the European countries and the Soviet Union.
Right now, I'd just like to ask, how many people tonight have changed their minds? How many people feel differently about the Constitution? That's pretty good, 5 people. Now, how many people have come out of here with a lot of different things to think about? That's even better. Well, I think it's about time to wrap up here. I'm just wondering, does anyone else have any more comments they'd like to make?
Yeah, this is just pursuing Aboriginal issues directly.
This agreement gives the Aboriginal people the right to say no to having sawmills, etc., built on their land, right? But I mean, I spent a couple days in Alkaline Lake, and they fish their salmon out of the Fraser River, and there's 4 poke mills upriver. So, what, you know, I mean, this is kind of a broad spectrum question type thing. I mean, you probably had, I mean, there's no real way to answer it, but so they can say no to having a poke mill built on their land, but what good does that do them? You know, I mean, so another 4 get built upriver, and then there's 8 upriver. I mean, like, you're going to eat the fish out of the river. I mean, you understand? I think that's a pretty basic question, but so I mean,
it's what Penny said. It's only a constitution. It's not going to fix everything.
One of the things it does do, though, is give people fixed status. And so some of those groups then come in, and I have trouble believing that they're actually going to be in there as equal partners with provincial people. But at least it does give them some sort of legal status there for doing that kind of the lever stuff that was not in politics. I used to commercial fish on the coast, and a lot of the Indian people that I fished with and worked with had very specific ideas about what was going to happen for economic development on their reserve lands. And a lot of it was pretty shocking for me because I didn't think they should be fishing the way they were, to the extent that they were, to the extent that I quit my extremely lucrative job over it and won't go back again. And I used to be a geologist and worked for the mining companies, and I won't do that again either. Some of the work I did was at the request of Indian bands who intend to mine in the way that lots of the rest of us in Canada don't. We're working against the mining companies continuing to operate to make profit and multinational deals the way they have, because it works against us because we live downstream. And a lot of the Indian bands, we have to give them the power to decide their own pathway there. And so some of them will decide, not to mine and not to log on their lands. And they will decide to battle the upriver pulp mills, for example, or to form other coalitions with other groups, whether they're groups that I join, or whether they're groups that are municipal levels of government or provincial or whatever. Or they might decide to work against some of the things that I wish they would work for, the same way as I wish my federal and provincial and municipal politicians would work for. But in any case, that's their right. And so far, we have designed it so that our forebears and ancestors of all types have benefited from it, and we haven't let them decide. And I feel very strongly that this is not something that, as a document, that I feel is perfect, and I'm sure that if they hired me, I could have done a better job, but they said, yeah. But I really want to see that in our upcoming elections, which will happen after this, federally, that we as people are able to really demand a lot more of our politicians and not let them get away with this bullshit anymore. And to really say, you know, if we do this Constitution, then do it, guys. Let's see the environmental stuff. Like, let's see the stuff for women, and let's see the stuff for Native people here. Do your job. You pay good money. Sit down to those negotiations. I wanted to see that I've hired all these mostly guys and ties to be able to talk. I want to see if they can negotiate better than I can, because I don't have the time. And if I wanted to run for office, then that's what I would do. But otherwise, I really want to see us stop saying that we the people can do it, because we the people are kind of trying to be informed and trying to figure this stuff out, but we hire these people to do it for us, and I'm not happy that they do such a shitty job. So I want to see the Constitution go through, because it forces them to meet for a set number of times. And I want to see them do it, and I'm going to ride the card to make sure that the things that they need get discussed, get dealt with, and are interpreted legally all the way down to where I live, in a way that I'm happy with. And that's where I see that's my right as a human being, that's my right as a voter. So,
I read this the other day. It kind of goes like this: no matter who you vote for, the government gets elected. That's it's kind of a quote that I read.
One of my biggest problems with this whole
because I was part of it, and I consider it part of it. And if I was able to vote, I pretty much would enjoy it, because it's all lumped together. So you could vote next percent, no percent.
Thanks.
Yeah, I've been asked that question a lot, or people raise that issue a lot. And I think it needs to be taken into account. This was a negotiated document in which there was give and take. Some people had to give and some people had to take all the way along the line. And so if you broke the document up into little pieces, it wouldn't reflect that negotiated whole that it represents. And people would then vote for the things that were good for them and reject the things that had been offered to other people as good for them as part of the compromise. And the whole thing would just break down and it wouldn't be possible to negotiate. And that's why it has been put together. I buy your argument that it makes it very complicated, but I don't think there was any other way to do it under the circumstances. Otherwise, we would just get a further fragmentation of the country. It's bad enough now with people looking at just at their own interests, not at the others. And you can imagine if they were able to vote just for their own interests and not vote for the interests of the country as a whole, it would just make it that much worse.
And the tyranny of the majority would work, which is what always works. Like there's mostly white people, right? So if we could vote...
White people living in central Canada, we might say.
Yeah. If we could vote as Caucasian Canadians to disenfranchise the Indian people and still keep the changes in the Senate, we would. Maybe not we in this room, maybe we're cut off Canadians, but we would. Canada would, I'll tell you, because I've been out arguing it. The only way that Western Canadian males are maybe, a few of them, going to vote for this thing is if they get an equal Senate. And if we let them vote for the Senate and not inherit self-government, then they just vote down the self-government the next day. Central Canadians, if we let them vote, 60% of Canada lives in Quebec and Ontario. They would vote that Quebec gets 25%, but no changes to the Senate. Quebec gets a distinct society, but no devolution of powers to the Anglo provinces. It wouldn't work. See, and that's the joy of the deal. Is that we got them all in the room once, and it'll never happen again. In fact, this morning, the premier who spoke up for Aboriginal people at the table was defeated, and is no longer in office, and will never be there again. So if you tried to get those same 14 people together, the one Anglo premier who had actually tried to settle land claims and could go there and say, listen, fellas, it's not that bad, he would no longer be at the table. Because the people are, the Caucasian folks are either already punished them, he's out.
And I know a few people have drifted in and out throughout the evening, but I feel that this vote will still be a good representation of what we had earlier. So how many yeses do we have now? $50. How many noes? How many are still undecided? This is quite a radical change in numbers. So obviously, I think that we've accomplished something here tonight. And even if you're still deadlocked in what you feel, as long as you've been given a different outlook on how to think of things, we've just given a few more things to think about. That's something definitely very positive. So I'd like to thank everyone for coming out tonight, and I'd like you all to give yourselves a big hand.